It is 3 in the morning, and you are awake again. You know this ceiling. And you know the thought that just arrived because it has come before, and tonight it feels like the truest thing you have ever thought. Right now, fewer people are awake than at any other hour of the day. So, that thought shows up with nobody around to argue with it. Most advice says it is a malfunction. Sleep it off. It will look smaller tomorrow. But the thought is usually accurate. What breaks at this hour is the verdict your mind attaches to it. I want to say something before we get into why, because most people your age have been told the opposite for years. You are not being irrational at that hour. You know you are not. Which is exactly why the advice has never helped. When somebody tells you those thoughts are not real, you can name the thing. You can name the appointment. You can name the person you have not called. You can name the number in the account and what happens if it has to stretch another 8 years. Nothing about that is invented. Two systems break down at that hour and they break in opposite directions. One of them gets louder and the one that is supposed to check it stops answering. Everything you feel between 2 and 4 lives in that gap. Start with the one that goes quiet because it explains why the whole thing feels like clarity instead of tiredness. Your mood is not a straight line that drains as the day goes on. It has a shape, and the shape follows the clock. The part of you that can feel good about anything reaches the lowest point of the entire day, somewhere between 1 and 4 in the morning. The part that carries dread runs on a schedule of its own. It stays fairly level all day and then climbs sharply at night. Put those two together and you get a very specific window. Your capacity for hope is scraping the floor and the weight is climbing at the same time on a schedule. Whether or not anything happened, nothing in your life changed between 11 at night and 2 in the morning. The test result is the same result. The conversation with your daughter happened when it happened. The number in the account did not move. What moved is the instrument reading all of it. There is a reason it is this hour and not 11 at night, and it is physical. Your body temperature is not fixed. It drifts down through the night and reaches its lowest point in the back half of your sleep, and that low point is one of the markers researchers use to tell what time it is inside a person, regardless of what the clock on the wall says. It is the deepest part of the night as your body measures it, and the floor of your mood sits right around that same point. Researchers have watched mood run on its own daily cycle, and the bottom of that cycle lands near the temperature low. So the hour when you keep waking up is the coldest, lowest part of your own 24-hour cycle, and you happen to be conscious for it. But there is a second thing running at the same time, and this one explains something you have probably noticed without being able to name it. Mood follows the clock, and it also gets worse the longer you have been awake. On its own, whatever the hour is. The same research found both effects at once, a daily rhythm and a steady decline that tracks how long you have been up. Now put the two together and look at what happens to you in that hour. You wake at 3, you are already sitting at the bottom of the daily cycle. And from the second your eyes open, you start adding waking time on top of it, minute by minute, while you lie there, which means 5 in the morning is worse than 3, and nothing has to happen in between for that to be true. At 5, you're still near the floor of the cycle, and you have now been awake for 2 hours on top of it, and the two effects stack. That is why the thought that felt heavy at 3 feels unanswerable at 5. That is why people who get up and make tea at 4 in the morning often describe the worst version of the whole night arriving right before the sky starts to change. You were not losing your grip. You were sitting in the exact overlap of 2 separate declines, and there is something almost kind buried in that if you look at it directly. The reason it lifts in the morning is that the cycle turned. Your temperature came up, the clock moved past the low point, and the machinery that reads your life went back to reading it accurately. That is the whole difference between that hour and 9 in the morning. And that shift does not announce itself. Your mind does not tell you it is running at the bottom of its range. It hands you the conclusion finished, and the conclusion arrives feeling like insight. So if the mood system is the part that moved, why do the thoughts come back so specific? Why does that hour hand you a sentence somebody said to you in a kitchen 20 years ago, word for word? That is the second system, and it is the one that gets louder. Researchers did something that sounds a little cruel. They took a group of people and kept half of them awake for a day and a half. Then they put both groups in a scanner and showed them the same set of upsetting pictures. The tired brains reacted more than 60% harder, same pictures, same eyes, 60% more alarm. But the number is only half of it. The researchers called what they found a disconnect, and the disconnect is the real story. They did not just see a louder alarm. They saw the alarm stop talking to the part of the brain that decides how seriously to take it. Think of that second part as the supervisor. All day long, it takes whatever comes in and asks whether it deserves the weight it is demanding. Losing sleep cuts the line between the two. So picture what you are actually running at that point in the night. The alarm turned up past 60%, the supervisor gone home, everything that comes through gets flagged, and there is nobody left downstream reading the flags. And that explains something that has probably confused you for years. Why the thoughts at that hour are so often about something real. The research describes it as a narrow focus on ordinary or negative material, which then gets handed the wrong amount of emotional weight by an alarm that will not settle. Read that again. Incorrect weight, not incorrect content. Your mind at that hour is running a search, and everything it returns already existed before you lay down. It goes through your actual life. The thing you said to your sister, the follow-up you have been not scheduling, the money, the person who is gone. Every item on that list is real. You could check each one in daylight. You know the sequence better than I could describe it. You are on your side, you have been on your side for a while, and the first one shows up. Usually it is small. Then the small one brings a bigger one, and the bigger one brings a name, and by the fourth item, you are somewhere you never agreed to go, being shown a conversation from 19 years ago in full resolution. Nobody chose that order. It runs on its own. What your mind cannot do anymore is weigh the list. Weigh the appointment you have been avoiding, and an offhand comment from a coworker in Tuthian 4 arrive with exactly the same urgency, because the part that used to sort them by size is the part that went offline. Everything is an emergency, including the things that are barely a problem. So every item on that list is real. What goes wrong is the size tag stapled to it. Now, if it stopped there, 3 in the morning would be a heavy hour and nothing more. It does not stop there, and this next part almost nobody covers because it moves from what the hour feels like into what it makes you do. The reward system runs on the same clock, and it moves in a direction most people would never guess. It is at its strongest in the afternoon. At night, it splits in half. The expectation of reward runs high while the sensitivity to consequences drops away, and the chemistry driving that expectation peaks in the second half of the dark. Put those together and you have described a specific person. Somebody who at 2 a.m. is certain this is a good idea and who cannot feel the cost of it at all. That is the message to your son that you typed at 1:40 and read again at 7 with your stomach dropping. That is the order that arrived 4 days later and made no sense. That is the letter to your brother about the estate, the one you rewrote in your head for 2 years and finally sent in the dark. Run the same decision through 2 in the afternoon and watch what happens to it. The idea shows up, you feel the upside, and about a second later, you also feel the part where you still have to sit across from this person at Christmas. Both halves arrive. You decide with the whole picture. At 2 in the morning, only the first half shows up. And because the second half never arrives at all, there is nothing in your head to push back with. No debate, no hesitation, none of the friction that normally tells you to wait. It feels like certainty, which is exactly why it is so convincing while it is happening. So there are 3 failures stacked on the same hour, mood at its floor, the alarm running 60% hot with nobody supervising, reward inflated and consequence switched off. And here is what all 3 have in common. Not one of them touches whether the material is true. That is why the hour feels honest, because part of it is, there is something your mind does in those hours that it refuses to do during the day. All day you run a filter, and that filter is optimistic on purpose. It exists so you can drive to the store and answer the phone without an audit of every unresolved thing in your life running underneath. It holds things down. That is useful, and it is also an arrangement you agreed to a long time ago so you could keep functioning. At night, the filter is the first thing to go. What is left is the raw inventory. Everything you have been carrying and not looking at, laid out with no order and no mercy. By your age, that inventory is long. Not because you failed at anything, but because you have lived long enough to have real things on it. People who are gone. A body that negotiates now. Decisions from 20 years ago that turned out to matter more than they looked at the time. So the person lying awake is seeing the actual contents of their life with the daytime coding stripped off, and then in the same moment being handed a completely broken reading of what those contents mean. That is the whole thing. Your 3 a.m. mind is an accurate witness and a terrible judge. It also explains why the oldest advice in the world works, even though the reason people give for it is wrong. They tell you to sleep on it. That has nothing to do with time passing or problems shrinking overnight. In that same research, the rested brains were the ones with the alarm turned down and the line to the supervisor working. Sleep puts the supervisor back at the desk, and the item finally gets read by somebody qualified to read it, which means there is a move here that almost nobody gives you. Nobody needs to be instructed to stop thinking at night. Nobody has ever managed it. The move is to separate the two jobs the way your own mind has already separated them. Take the record, leave the sentencing until morning. That means something you can actually do tonight. When it arrives, write the item down. One line. No story attached. The scan, the call to my sister, the thing about the will. You are not solving it, and you are not arguing with it in the dark. You are taking a statement, and that is all you are doing with it tonight. Then hand that list to 9 in the morning, when the supervisor is back and the mood instrument is off the floor. Some of what you wrote down will turn out to be almost nothing, and you will feel a little foolish about how heavy it was 6 hours earlier. And some of it will turn out to matter, and you will finally deal with it because your daytime filter had been quietly keeping it out of view for a year. That second kind is the reason none of this is a trick to make you feel better. The hour has the list right. It is just the worst possible time to decide what any of it means. And if you have noticed that the same few conversations keep coming back at that hour in the same words, in a loop that never closes, that runs on a different system entirely, and it has a name.